Once you become the sort of person that's prepared to tackle the challenges that you're facing head on and to fall on your sword and go, yeah, that was pretty damn stupid paying that or buying that or doing this, if that's how you've happened to get into the situation, and then be tough enough and park your ego to the side to wear the consequences of it and say, right, I'm going to get this paid off and I'm going to have to take a second job to do that. So when your friends are saying, hey, we're going out for a few drinks over the weekend, well, I can't, I'm working, or what are you doing? I'm working at Coles, I'm stacking shelves on the weekend. And they're probably going to have a bit of a laugh at what are you doing that for? Because I need to get my debt under control. That is a bruise to the ego. But what you've become, there are lifters and leaners in life. You've become a lifter. You're someone that's prepared to lift and challenge the problems that you have head on and fix them. And that's an enormous step in personal growth. Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show. This week we are looking at debt, which is something so many people are having to grapple with right now in the tough economic conditions. We're going to explore some really practical steps to take to ensure not only can you get yourself out of that position, but also you can make some behavior modifications that avoid it happening again. As always, there's plenty to take out of the show, so make sure you take plenty of notes, but most importantly, make sure you take plenty of action. Hey guys, welcome to this week's Money and Investing Show with me, your host, Andrew Baxter, and as always, my offsider and co-host, Olarenshaw.
Good to be here, Mr. B, in a fresh environment too. I'm liking it.
Indeed, new office move completed last week, and we're just waiting on the final touches to a new podcast studio. So
I'm looking forward to that.
Here we are in the boardroom.
Indeed, we make do with what we've got, and in particular today we've got an exciting episode for our listeners, albeit a very important one in the current climate, because we're going to talk about 5 smart and important ways to pay off your debt. Very timely conversation.
Look, it is, debt is a major issue. Here we are in the midst of a cost of living crisis in Australia, where with higher interest rates on top of a cost of living crush, it is getting very difficult out there for people. You're starting to see things like mortgage delinquencies increase. So this is very much a grassroots problem. Ordinarily, if you've got a cost of living problem, that's one thing, but when it's then added to with higher interest rates as well, it's a double whammy, that's for sure.
And we totally empathize with our listeners out there because things are tough, and the common trend is to just look for a credit card or get a personal loan, and then you start to build up debt, and then all of a sudden 6 months down the track, you can find yourself in a really challenging situation.
Well, that's exactly right, Mitch. I mean, this particular scenario we're in with the economy, with cost of living, it's worth exploring that for a few moments to see where people end up getting themselves into drama. At the end of the day, people have a priority, and at the point now, for some people, it's literally being able to put food on the table and have the electric on in their home, in addition to their having to either pay rent or mortgage payments. And what we often see in this, there are 3 phases that I've identified. The first phase is denial. Well, she'll be right, this will go away, it's no big deal. The second phase is the damage phase, where you start to cut as many costs as you can within your household. And I know these aren't hardcore cost cutting, but subscriptions, streaming TV, gym membership, things that you don't particularly use, magazines you don't read anymore, that sort of stuff. And then the third phase on there is a desperate phase, where you realize that you're so far away from what you need. I guess that emotion, as well as the reality of really struggling to make ends meet, can prompt people to start ratcheting up debt that can be really toxic. And we've talked about debt before. It can be good debt and it can be bad debt.
Can we explore that first, though, before we go into the common mistakes? And then, because having good debt, something like a mortgage, is a great thing, right? Because it's a place to live and it's good debt. What about bad debt? What's the difference?
Yeah, like good debt, as you say, is an asset that's either income generating or it's producing a capital gain for you, or another different way of defining good debt will be something that could be tax deductible for you.
Got you.
Bad debt, personal loans, credit card debt, buy now, pay later, all the things that are A, expensive, typically B, are lifestyle related rather than asset building related, and come at a pretty penny when it comes to repaying them. So that ratcheting up of debt and reaching for the credit card or buy now, pay later to try and get through a very, very tight household budget provides an immediate relief. And I don't mean in terms of immediate gratification, because we're not talking about discretionary decadent spending. We're talking about survival mode for a lot of people out there. So it kind of takes if I can use the expression, the foot off the throat for a period of time. But that problem is just moved further down the line, and due to the way that interest works and compounds and fees on cards and things like that, becomes a significantly bigger problem that you're then facing. So you've alleviated the short-term desperate stage, but you've replaced it with a bigger problem down the line.
Indeed. Let's talk about some strategies here, AB. And the first one that springs to my mind in order paying off debt is, first and foremost, actually consolidating your debt.
Yeah. Look, one of the mainstays of any liberating financial advice conversation with someone is to get a really true and fair picture of where they stand right now. And so a lot of people would be unaware either of the debt levels that are actually running or what it's costing them to run those debt levels. So I think it's important to sit down and go, okay, this is what I've got outstanding on my credit card, for example, and I've been paying the minimum monthly just to keep the bank off my back, or maybe you've been doing a little more than that. And this is the interest rate that it's costing me, and actually go through and see where your debt may sit. And one of the things to do from a consolidation perspective may be to wrap up that really expensive debt that you're trying to service, which is typically on a credit card, and refinancing it through a personal loan. Now, the personal loan will most likely be at a lower interest rate. So effectively, you're still having to pay interest, but less. So you're saving money on that paying. And you've only got one front that you're really working with then, and that's to get that personal loan paid off. Now, there's an enormous caveat with this. And that is, if you get on that pathway of consolidation and get your credit card debt cleared by taking out a personal loan, that doesn't then give you license to start using your credit cards again and creating a bigger problem.
That's when you wind it back to debit cards, right?
You have to be on a cash covered basis, which, as you say, can be a debit card if you need to use that facility, but you must not rack up any further debt. You've got to get that addressed. And look, there's downside to personal loans. It potentially could affect your credit score for a period of time if you're looking at doing finance elsewhere. That said, if you stay on top of the payments and you get it paid off, then it's going to be a very short-term blip on your credit history, which is nothing to be concerned with.
What about for people that have multiple sources of credit cards going at once? Isn't that a problem?
Yeah, again, that's something that can really sort of push out there, especially when they're all falling due for payment, either at a similar time or worse, when they're at different times, and you just think, I've got that done, only next week there's the Visa coming, and the week after that is the Amex, and you've got this real tapestry of bills that are coming in. And oftentimes when you look through the statement, you go, well, gee, what was that for? Because it was something that perhaps was a non-essential. So I think, watching your spending through a budget to cut it back to essentials, cutting out any unnecessary subscriptions or costs are two things. Looking then at your debt portfolio, as you can call it, and trying to consolidate it into a lower interest rate are all steps that you can take to try and move on to the front foot. Another one I'm a huge advocate for, as you know, on that is that notion of taking up a side hustle. So, you might feel that you're pretty wrung out with work, but find something that you can do on the side to earn extra money, and maybe the income from that extra money 100% goes into tackling your debt situation. So everything you earn from that. Yeah, like my dad, when I was growing up as a kid, if he couldn't get overtime at the car factory where he worked, he'd work on a building site, labouring, and if he couldn't get work there because the weather was inclement, which is quite often through the UK, especially in the winter, he'd weld and repair cars at home. He'd always be doing something, and his goal was always to be able to live off what he was doing on the side, so that he could use his entire wage effectively to pay off our mortgage.
Which makes it a priority and then pays it off quicker, which is the right thing to do.
So you're getting your debt under control. And I guess also what we're setting up here is a more subconscious behavior pattern, that you've created a problem of debt, not necessarily through your own fault. Let's be really clear on that. This isn't a beat up to say your fault, you're in debt, because a lot of people are in that situation. Having to take on a second source of income to try and tackle it is probably going to make you think a little differently before you hit that credit card.
Indeed.
Because you realize what you're having to do to try and tackle that and get it paid down.
Absolutely. I think as a second point to add to this and also expand on it is to really study your habits. I mean, why do you have the debt in the first place? What do you suggest, AB, for our listeners out there when they sit down and reflect on, okay, this is my debt, it's consolidated, this is what I have. Then working out the root cause, because prevention is better than dealing with it, right?
100%. So, your priorities initially are to focus on the high interest rate, expensive ones to get repaid. A consolidation may assist you in getting that resolved. It may not, but it will at least get down some of those big higher interest rate numbers. So prioritize what you're going to pay off in the first instance. And one of the things that you can often find is that during times of slower economic conditions or economic hardship, a lot of institutions can be, not always, but can be a lot better to deal with. And that ability to pick up the phone, for example, to the bank and go, look, we're struggling at the moment. What can we do in terms of a restructure on a loan, for example, or maybe shaving payments or having a payment holiday for a couple of weeks, and it's going to get tacked on at the end. You're going to pay it, but that might be enough to give you that breathing space. So that's a technique that you can do by talking to your creditors effectively.
So you can actually negotiate this stuff.
Absolutely. The tax office is another example of that.
Heard that before, yes.
And I've seen that. If we look at the pandemic, for example, they were particularly lenient with a lot of people then. They're significantly harsher now. But I think that pendulum is starting to swing back again, whereby, if you have that open conversation to say, look, this is where I'm at and I'm asking you for some help, there's a possibility when you ask for help that you get it. I think the old saying is the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And so there's an element of pride that you need to swallow in order to do that. But what really is pride anyway? It's just ego. Park it to the side and have those questions with people that you owe money to. And it gives you the ability then potentially to renegotiate a better term that's going to help you get through that more difficult patch.
I also think too, in that sense, it probably makes you feel less alone, because this probably feels quite isolating for a lot of people, particularly if you are a lone wolf, for example. If you actually have someone in your team, i.e. the bank, you're kind of in it together and you can work out a plan, right?
And it's in their interest. I know a lot of people would be cynical about that, probably myself included in all fairness, but the banks can and will work for you, because it's sometimes in their interest to make sure you get through that sticky period if you're totally a mortgage payment and things like that. For the second point you raised about understanding your habits, it is important to understand how you've got yourself into this position. And as I said right at the start of the show, a lot of people are trapped there because of the cost of living rise and interest rates moving up, making their mortgage payments or their rent more expensive, plus everything else, and it's been a double whammy for them. There are other things that can creep in there too. And if you found yourself falling foul of that discretionary spending, maybe you've had a bit of a buy now, pay later run in, or you've hit your credit card a little harder for, let's say, lifestyle purchases or things of that sort of nature. Taking a good hard look at yourself and go, okay, this is how I got myself in trouble. This is the trigger for me doing that. I was bored, so I was browsing online at night, so I ended up buying something that I thought was going to make me feel good, and now I've got a $400 credit card bill to service on the back of it. Is trying to get to that root cause of what made you buy that in the first place. Was it something that you need, or was it something that you want? And I think that conversation is always a great watershed in terms of, if it's something you need, then you need it. Then you can shop around, maybe find a cheaper alternate to it. If you think about your groceries, you need your groceries. Is there a way of doing it cheaper? Probably. You could grow stuff if you've got a garden at home. Nice little sideline for you to work with. My son's chicken business, good example of that. Where he and look, there's an egg shortage at the minute, so we've got massive demand.
Supply and demand. He's a smart cookie.
Jack's egg business is going through the roof right now. But you can grow stuff at home. It may be that you revise where you shop. And there are choices where the cost of shopping is cheaper and arguably a better product in many instances too. So, there are things that you can do proactively in that space too, but understanding how you got there, because once you understand what's caused the problem, you can start to take that personal development route of reprogramming yourself to avoid doing the same thing again.
This is a growing interest for me personally. I understand with habits, there's a cue, there's a habit, and then there's the reward. And that's the feedback loop that most people go through. I think understanding for our listeners here, if you're struggling with spending and getting your debt down, what's the cue? What is it that sets you off? The habit is the spend, and the reward might be the instant gratification. But think about the long-term prospects of your financial health, right?
That's right. The dopamine release will fade from that new purchase a long time before the credit card bill is gone. And I know we're just focusing on discretionary spending. If we bring it back to where a lot of people are right now, which is really saddled with debt because they're struggling to make ends meet, that notion of adding an additional income in some way, shape or form, again, it's a bit of a bruise to the ego, but you've just got to park that to the side and do what's right to get through these challenging times. And I think from a growth perspective, seeing as we're talking about how we develop as human beings, once you become the sort of person that's prepared to tackle the challenges that you're facing head on, and to fall on your sword and go, yeah, that was pretty damn stupid paying that or buying that or doing this, if that's how you've happened to get into this situation, and then be tough enough and park your ego to the side to weigh the consequences of it and say, right, I'm going to get this paid off, and I'm going to have to take a second job to do that. So when your friends are saying, hey, we're going out for a few drinks over the weekend, I can't, I'm working, or what are you doing? And I'm working at Coles, I'm stacking shelves on the weekend. And they're probably going to have a bit of a laugh at, what are you doing that for? Because I need to get my debt under control. That is a bruise to the ego. But what you've become, there are lifters and leaners in life. You've become a lifter. You're someone that's prepared to lift and challenge the problems that you have head on and fix them. And that's an enormous step in personal growth, because you've recognized that there's behavior that you need to modify. The medicine doesn't taste very nice, but you're prepared to do it. And you actually followed through and did that. And that, to me, when I see someone that's done that, I literally, I meet people all the time. I met someone last night at an event we were doing in Wollongong, which is in exactly that situation. And that person will get all my time, energy, and focus, because they've already shown that they're prepared to step up and do what needs to be done, as opposed to moaning about it.
Indeed. We've spoken of consolidation, prioritization, understanding your habits. What about avoiding common mistakes out there? Because there may be some that people aren't necessarily aware of. One that springs to my mind that's a sneaky one is, say, store credit, for example.
2 years interest free, get you in the door. 3 years interest free, 10
Forget
years,
about it.
whatever money, yeah. And you go, how good's this? Until you miss the payment, in which case the fees and charges that sit around that, and rightly so, is all disclosed in the material. What that people read is go click accept and they move on.
Of course.
But the fees are pretty hideous if you step over the line and transgress with those. So avoiding falling into that trap is key. You must make sure that you meet your obligations to fully utilize that interest-free period if it's being offered. Nothing's for free, and you got to bear that in mind. And I guess a lot of those companies, and I'm not going to say it's predatory, but they know there's going to be a percentage of people that miss a payment, and they're going to make plenty of cash from that through the fees and charges that are then introduced on the basis of a default or a missed payment.
What about a balance transfer? What are your thoughts there?
Look, again, it's something that a lot of card companies advertise when they're trying to effectively, I guess, buy market share. So if you've got an outstanding credit card balance in one joint, you can transfer it over and have 60, 90 days interest-free onto a new card with a slightly higher balance, which gives you the ability to dig a deeper hole in which to fall in. And that can be quite challenging. And I think, the point you raised previously, that's where you need to move to a debit card, is key. I think if you've got yourself in a situation where, if you've got a credit card, I've had a credit card forever, and I've religiously been someone that makes sure it's paid in full, on time, every time. So it effectively is a very effective use of capital, because you've got free money for a period of time, but you've got to be in a position to stay on top of it. And if you've demonstrated a lack of discipline in that space, then you haven't earned the right to have access to that funding. This is, okay, it might seem a little harsh or draconian using these sorts of terms, but my role as a coach is to help people enjoy financial success, not create financial stress. And so, to that point, if you're someone that's transgressed and you need to balance transfer, rather than balance transfer in the hope of picking up some points, get it into a personal loan, get it paid off over a period of months, whatever the loan may then look like. Cut your credit cards up and go to a debit card situation where it's cash covered, and that's going to help stop you digging a bigger hole. And you don't earn the right to have a credit card again until such times as you can demonstrate to yourself that you can be trusted with it.
Indeed.
Harsh as that sounds, and it may well be harsh, it's the way of getting yourself out of that finance. If you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning worried about your money, taking a different approach to managing it will relieve that stress. And that's what this is all about.
Sometimes you have to be harsh to get an outcome, and that's what we're all about.
Too right.
Any last common mistakes for our listeners out there before we wrap up, AB?
I think the key things: understanding the triggers, getting a remedial plan in play to get it paid off as much as you can, getting a secondary form of income to help accelerate that are all really important steps to take in there. Understanding who you are and why you've created those problems, and some of them may be beyond your doing. So, got made redundant or lost your job. Car had a flat tire, and the quarterly electric bill came in along with a medical bill for one of your kids.
All piles up.
That's a pretty tough set of circumstances to have to deal with, and that's not necessarily your fault. But how you deal with that set of challenges can be a really important fork in the road. You can take route one, which might be, we'll put it on the card and we'll deal with it later, and it just becomes this mountain to have to. Or you can go route two, which is to be more strategic in the way that we're going. And I think trying to be really objective as to how you're in this position, no blame, no fault, no judgment, just the fact that we recognize you're in trouble and we're going to help pull you out of it. Now, I guess it's, yeah, if you saw somebody drowning in a river, yeah, and you've got the ability to throw a ring to help them, that's what you do first of all, which is this conversation. You don't stand there with your arms folded going, see, you should have swum between the flags like they told you to, or, yeah, I bet you're glad or bet you wish you hadn't jumped in off the bridge, or you shouldn't have had a drink before you got in the water. That's not the time for that conversation. The time is to throw the ring in, pull them out, get them on the riverbank, and they go, what happened?
Indeed.
Yeah, and then work through that. And I think it's really important to work in that syntax, fix the problem, get the stress down, understand the cause of it, work on a fix for that, and then over a period of time modify attitudes towards money, behavior patterns, and things of that sort of ilk, as well as action steps like second and third form of income, to make sure that you never find yourself there. That, to me, I think is the kind of mindset that people should take out of this. And there's no shame in being in a tough financial position right now. A lot of people are. We saw that research where most people have only literally got less than $1,000 in the bank. 22% of people got less than $1,000 in the bank.
Indeed.
Which is really scary, and it doesn't give you a lot of meat on the bone to protect yourself. Grab a copy of our book, The Wealth Playbook. I mean, that's going to give you this sort of stuff and much more in terms of laid out very carefully in terms of game plans. And it gives you the ability to be learning a different set of lenses to look through when it comes to living your life to avoid these kind of problems. And that's key. Find out what's caused it, but get the problem fixed first and work backwards. So think of that. Rubber ring, pull the person out the river so they don't drown, then work on what caused it, as opposed to, haha, you deserve to be there. That is definitely not the message. A lot of people are really doing it tough right now, and it's not their fault.
Indeed. Great advice, AB. Thank you very much.
Anytime, Mitch. Absolute pleasure. There you have it, guys. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, hit the notification button, and we'll look forward to hosting you next week.